Picture this. The year is 1930, and the world's first ever FIFA World Cup is about to kick off in Uruguay. It's a landmark moment, the dawn of a global sporting phenomenon. 13 teams from all corners of the globe are heading to South America to battle for a brand new trophy. Hang on a minute. How come there's no one from here? You know, the place that invented association football. Hang about. They didn't turn up to the first 3 World Cups. How did this happen? Who let this happen? I was specifically told it was Uruguay lifted that inaugural trophy in 1930. Italy conquered in 1934 and 1938, while the Brits sat at home. How on earth did the very inventors of modern football miss its biggest new spectacle? Well, I'm about to tell you. Our story starts not with the 1930 World Cup, but back in 1904, when FIFA was founded by a bunch of European nations keen to standardise the rules of the game and pit countries against each other. The respective British football associations were politely invited to join. The English FA's reply was, "The Council of the Football Association cannot see the advantages of such a federation, but on all matters upon which joint action was desirable, they would be prepared to confer." In other words, good luck, jog on. The rest of the associations of Wales, Scotland and Ireland, still part of the UK in 1904, followed suit, which, given the context of the time, makes sense. The home nations had standardised the rules of the game themselves and were, at the time, the only countries playing regular international football, albeit against each other. For comparison, the first official continental European international friendly didn't occur until 1902, a game between Austria and Hungary, 2 countries that weren't even founding members of this new footballing federation. For now, the associations of England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland were happy competing in their own British Home Championship, an annual international competition first contested in 1883. Why mix with these foreign amateurs who have barely played a game against each other when you could just play every year in a cosy 4-team tournament without ever having to get your passport out? Eventually, the home nations did join FIFA, in fits and starts. England in 1905, Scotland and Wales in 1910, and Ireland in 1911. But then came the Great War, and in its aftermath, deep tensions arose all around, which, was understandable. The football associations of the United Kingdom demanded that the federations of Germany, Austria and Hungary be booted from FIFA due to their role during the First World War. FIFA rejected the notion, and, in 1920, the British associations withdrew from FIFA entirely. However, time really does heal all wounds, and a few years later they rejoined just in time for the 1924 Olympics, and an excuse to argue with FIFA once again. But this time over something more fun: legal sporting definitions. Association football at the Olympic Games had been contested since 1908, but without FIFA's involvement. This would change at the 1924 Summer Olympiad, with FIFA organising its first ever championship event as part of the World Sporting Jamboree, which created somewhat of a monumental migraine for FIFA, who, though they ran the tournament, were still tethered to the Olympic ideal of amateurs only. Football, on the other hand, was heading full throttle into professional territory, so FIFA had to bend over backwards to keep everyone happy. Well, almost everyone. Enter the concept of broken time payments. Basically, a polite way of compensating players for missed wages and expenses without blatantly waving the professional flag. The Belgian FA had first allowed for payments to amateur players for time lost from work in 1921, and other associations on the continent soon followed. The football associations of England, Scotland, Wales and now Northern Ireland were less than happy with this. Their long-held principle was that footballers that were actually paid for their performances are classified as professionals rather than amateurs. The respective FAs sought assurances from FIFA that their definition of amateur and professional status would be upheld, but FIFA once again told them to do one. In protest, the football associations of the home nations, as well as Denmark weirdly, all withdrew their teams from competing at the Summer Games of 1924. And when FIFA stood by their definition ahead of the 1928 Olympics, the 4 associations from the UK collectively decided they weren't playing ball with FIFA's approach any longer. They withdrew en masse, proclaiming it was time to conduct their affairs as their long experience dictated, which I'm choosing to interpret as, we invented the game, we don't need a bunch of continentals telling us how to run it, thank you very much. Where have I heard that before? Just like that, the home nations waltzed out. Again. Turns out though, they'd cope just fine. Both of the World Championships were a success without the home nations, with Uruguay winning in the final on both occasions. Thanks to the triumph of football at the Olympics, FIFA, led by their president Jules Rimet, got it into their heads to launch their own standalone international bash. In May 1928, Jules and co declared they'd hold a true World Championship. Uruguay, having bagged 2 Olympic titles, and conveniently celebrating its 100th birthday as a nation, got the nod to host the very first World Cup in 1930. The prospect of transatlantic journey during the Great Depression didn't exactly thrill Europe's footballing associations. Ships aren't free, and crossing an ocean takes more than just a packed lunch. So most European nations simply went, nah, don't fancy it. It wasn't until Jules did some serious persuading, cue frantic telegrams and polite arm twisting, that Belgium, France, Romania and Yugoslavia finally agreed to hop on board. In total, 16 teams were due to show up. Joining the European teams from North America were Mexico and the United States of America. From South America, Argentina, Bolivia, Brazil, Chile, Paraguay, Peru and of course the host Uruguay. From Asia, Japan and Siam. And to make it a truly world event, just one team from Africa, Egypt. Unfortunately, Japan and Siam failed to show up after realizing how much of a ball ache it was to sail from Asia to South America across the Pacific back then, and Egypt sadly missed their boat across the Atlantic. Poor lads. For the British, who weren't even in FIFA, it was a no-go. They already had domestic competitions, the home championship, and a general sense of why bother crossing an ocean to play foreign sides who we presume to be inferior anyway. Uruguay went on to lift the trophy in front of a raucous crowd, while the Brits presumably shrugged and went back to playing amongst themselves in the rain. Unlike the early 1920s, the British FAs weren't so quick to U-turn on their decision to leave FIFA, but they were at least more cordial with each other. The UK football associations wanted to still be part of the conversation around international football, and FIFA wanted them on board, because the Brits had founded the game and thus gave FIFA more legitimacy. The home nation FAs were on the periphery, but carried on in many ways as if they were basically in it. By 1934, the World Cup was due to take place in Mussolini's Italy, still not exactly a comforting scenario for British teams. FIFA, still wanting participation from the UK, offered all sorts of sweeteners. They proposed free travel, direct entry to the finals for England and Scotland, but again, being out of FIFA, and perhaps with a little persuasion from the Home Office, the football associations refused. Italy won the thing, the British lightly read a small headline in the back pages while continuing with their own domestic schedules and beloved home championship. Come 1938, the tournament landed in France. Did that help? Not really. England did at least make time to travel to Paris for a friendly against the hosts 9 days before the tournament started, running out 4-2 winners, then hopped on the ferry back home. Italy retained the trophy, but this was about to be overshadowed by something else landing in France, and not in a good way. When World War II broke out, international football took a backseat to, well, a global conflict. But 6 years later, the British associations began rethinking their isolation. Even they could see the game's global growth. If the future was big international tournaments like a resumed World Cup, they risked missing the boat entirely. In 1946, the 4 home associations finally rejoined FIFA. Cue the champagne. The federation was so thrilled they organised a Great Britain versus rest of Europe match at Hampden Park in 1947. Partly to raise cash for FIFA's post-war coffers, but also to reinforce the Brits' sense of superiority, I guess. Britain clobbered the continental side 6-1, which would have done nothing to deflate the ego of the home nations. The United Kingdom would first be represented at the 1950 World Cup, with the aforementioned British Home Championship providing the path for qualification. The top 2 teams from the competition would be admitted into the World Cup, which should have meant winners, England, and runners-up, Scotland. But, bizarrely, Scotland declined the opportunity to play in the tournament, despite qualifying for it, which is a story for another day. England would go on to make their grand World Cup debut, before making a not-so-grand exit thanks in part to a humbling defeat to the USA, beginning a long tradition of underperforming in the group stage. In hindsight, it's easy to laugh at the near 20-year standoff. By staying out, the British teams missed the first 3 World Cups, and effectively left the rest of the world to flourish without them. FA Secretary Stanley Roux eventually admitted that our isolation was no splendid matter. Many in the UK soon realised they'd relinquished the chance to shape global football from the inside. It took a world war and the unstoppable march of global football to finally reel them back in. As Jules Rimet had once predicted, it was always going to be abnormal for the very inventors of modern football to remain outside the biggest sporting federation in the world. Turns out he was right. And that's how the on-again, off-again love story between British football and FIFA finally got its happy ending. More or less.